sometimes the Raven stories aren't about a financial gift that you get, but they're about the gift of the ability to do something. This, again, story started with Mr. Chastain. He calls me on the telephone. He says, hey, Walt, he says, I'm down here at this equipment place, and they've got this big metal building they're tearing down and building a bigger one. And he said, inside the building, over in the corner, there's this office building that was built inside the building. He says it's got a restroom in it and that kind of stuff. And as an office building, do you want it? And I said, what do you mean, do I want it? He says, well, they think that they can pick it up and put it on a truck, and because it's built inside, and haul it up to you. Well, I guess so. He said, well, okay. He says, I'll let them know that they can bring it up to you. About a month later, I came home from somewhere. I'd been in town or something. My wife says, that building came. I said, what building? She says, that building that Mr. Chastain was talking about. It's down below. It's down there. It was, the area down at the lower camp where the boxcars are. And I drove down there, and there was this building, 14 feet wide and 20 feet long, and it's sitting there on 4 50-gallon drums. And now what do you do with it? It's not in the right spot. You can't just lower it down. How am I going to move it? And I got to looking at that thing and looking underneath it, and I went up to our scrap pile up at what we call the treasure yard. A few months before, a farmer had called me and said he's got a bunch of steel pipe main line that he's getting rid of. Did I want it for horse corrals and stuff? And so I said, sure. So I'd gone over and cut that stuff up and brought it in here. And I was looking at that steel pipe, and there was several sections that were like 25, 30 feet long they were 8 inches in diameter, pretty heavy walled steel pipe. And so I took this HD16 over to those things and put a chain around them and drug it out and got it into a big flat spot. And then I unhooked the chain and I backed the bulldozer up and I pulled it in right beside the pipe. And so I lowered the blade down parallel with that pipe and wrapped the pipe and the blade and this arm with chain. I did the same thing on the other side, and now I've got homemade forklift because that blade on the HD16 would go up 3.5 feet. And I had those pipes on there, and so they're sticking out in front of the blade about 16 feet or so, and then the other half of the pipe are tied to this arm. So I took it down and drove the bulldozer underneath that building, and I used the hydraulics on the blade to lift that building right up off those 50-gallon drums. And when it's in the air, I very slowly backed around. I only wanted to move it about 150 feet, and then I started very slowly driving over to where I wanted it. And I could see about 20 feet before it was getting to where I wanted it to be, that those pipes started to bend. And oh no. So I pull the fuel down, give it some more fuel, and it moved ahead a little bit faster, and it got up to within 3 feet of where I wanted it, and the pipes bent and it slid right off the pipes. And I backed up and the thing flopped on the ground, and it was within 3 feet of where we wanted it, and I said, that's where we want it. Right where it is. And that was our building we call Ike's Palace. Another thing that this bulldozer allowed us to do, in a way that it supplied some funds for us, was that our neighbor just to the west of us is Camp Katy. Today, Camp Katy is owned by the Department of Fish and Game. In the 70s and 80s, it was privately owned. And there was a man staying there named Ken, who was an older gentleman. he represented the owners, and he lived on the property. He wanted every year to do some grading at Camp Katy in order to keep the tamarins under control. He asked us if we would be interested in using our bulldozer to do that grading. And he said it has to be done from November through January, and that was the only month you could get down in the Camp Katy area and work with a bulldozer without getting stuck in the mud because of it was in the river channel. And those were the dry months, and we would go down and do the dozer work, and we'd get paid several $1,000s for the work that we did down there during those winter months. And that money was coming to us during those years when we didn't have any camps or retreats during the winter. And this was one of our only sources of income during that time. We moved the dozer to its final location just this last week. It was fun to do it, I tell you for sure. I did all the driving and all the maintenance on that thing myself for about 20 years. And then after 20 years, I turned it over to our team here who did it. But I think it's kind of a tribute to good stewardship that here's a machine that's 65 years old, and when we went out to start it, we pushed the button, and once we had the batteries the right charge, we pushed the button and vroom, started right up and moved to where it is. The undercarriage and stuff is kind of hurting, worn out, and we can't find parts for it. As far as we know, this may be the last actual running HD16 in America. It was only built between 1955 and 1965, and so there aren't a lot of them around. But we praise the Lord that it has served us well, and it has done the job that God intended it to do here. Every one of these stories about how God supplied is really God's hand behind the scenes, directing, as it were, the ravens to bring us what we needed at the time for our daily needs, and not more, but not less either. God is certainly faithful, and He is to be praised. We did a lot of work, but it's God who really did the work. We prayed, but it was God who answered the prayers. We thank the Lord for His answer to prayers, and He supplied the needs that we had here to keep this ministry going and moving ahead for Him. And the same has gone since 1986 all the way up till today, that God has continued to supply our needs.